Imagine sitting down, right, and practicing a new skill, like 100 times.
Wow.
Yeah, 100 times. Only to realize that your intense, super focused practice didn't actually make you better at all. In fact, it caused permanent damage to your brain's ability to ever perform that task correctly.
Which is, I mean, it's terrifying to think about.
Totally. So today's deep dive takes a hard look at this massive lie we tell ourselves about learning, which is that practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
Because it turns out unmonitored practice is actually a massive trap.
It really is. And it completely upends this modern dilemma we all face, right? Like, we tend to equate just the sheer volume of effort with the quality of the outcome.
Oh, for sure.
We assume that if we just sit at the desk longer or, drill more flashcards or read more manuals, we will inevitably learn more. But the mechanisms of how the human brain actually acquires a skill well, they tell a completely different story.
And look, if you are listening to this right now, I know you. You are the classic learner. You have this constant drive to understand the world, to pick up new skills, but you probably also share that creeping dread of information overload.
Oh, yeah. The burnout is real.
Right. We all want the shortcut to actually grasping a concept without just drowning in the busy work of it all. So the source material we are pulling from today is fascinating.
Yeah, it really is.
It's an instructional script designed specifically for modern education, and it's tailored toward homeschooling parents. But, and this is key, the core mechanics of what it argues apply to absolutely anyone, adult, child, anyone trying to learn anything. It basically builds toward this really provocative question, which is, does playing count as learning?
And what this source material does so brilliantly is it dismantles our default assumptions about schoolwork, like entirely. The goal today is to extract a completely new paradigm from this text. We want to look at how humans actually acquire mastery, and we are going to contrast that real skill acquisition with the endless stream of busy work that, honestly, society has just accepted as the normal way to learn.
Okay, let's unpack this because the text starts by diagnosing the problem with a scenario that it calls the kitchen table trap.
Ah, yes. The kitchen table trap.
Yeah, and while it's aimed at parents, I mean, the psychology here is totally universal. The script outlines this situation where a parent decides the traditional school system is failing their kid.
Right.
So they pull the kid out, bring them home, set them up right at the kitchen table, and the very first thing they do is hand out a massive packet of workbooks. They literally say, all right, sit there and do pages 15 through 22.
They immediately recreate the exact physical and structural dynamics of the classroom they just fled. And what's fascinating here is the deep empathy the source has for this. The specific detail it points out is that within 3 weeks, the child is sitting at that kitchen table just crying over a math packet.
Yeah.
And the parent is standing there completely baffled, wondering what they did wrong, because this home environment has instantly morphed into the stressful school environment they tried so hard to escape.
But I found myself questioning the logic of that parent. Like if you pull a kid out because you consciously realize the traditional system wasn't working, why is your absolute default instinct to just rebuild the exact same broken system, just like in a different building?
Well, I mean, it comes down to how humans handle the terror of the unknown.
Okay.
When we step into a space where we feel totally unqualified, like taking full responsibility for a child's education, we panic. So structure provides a false sense of security when we lack a better paradigm.
That makes sense.
A parent might think, well, I don't know the pedagogical theory behind teaching fractions, but I definitely know how to enforce a worksheet. The worksheet isn't there to serve the child's learning. The worksheet is basically a safety blanket to soothe the parent's anxiety.
Wow. And the source focuses on parents. But this is such a common human reflex. Think about when an adult decides they want to learn, I don't know, how to code or how to speak Spanish.
Oh, absolutely.
What is our immediate instinct? We don't go out and try to build a simple website or have a messy conversation with a native speaker. No, we buy a massive, dense grammar textbook and force ourselves to do pointless drills for 3 hours.
Yeah, we build our own adult kitchen table trap.
Exactly, because we think that is what serious learning is supposed to look like.
Right, because we cling to the only model of education we have ever seen. We spent 12, maybe 16 years conditioned inside that exact system. To us, suffering through a worksheet feels like learning, because that is the only version of learning we were ever given.
But the reason we cling to this broken, drill-heavy model is actually based on this massive, culturally ingrained myth about how skills are built neurologically.
Yes, the big myth.
The source tackles this head-on by deconstructing a phrase we have all heard our entire lives. Repetition is the mother of skill. Practice makes perfect. Do it again and again, and you will get better. We treat this like a universal law of physics.
You really do. And the source reveals that this phrase is only half true. And the missing half is the only part that actually matters.
Right.
The new belief we need to adopt is this: perfect repetition is the mother of skill.
Perfect repetition. Let's walk through the source's primary example here because it really clarifies the danger of getting this wrong.
Yeah, the math problem example.
Right, so imagine a child sits down at that kitchen table to do 100 multiplication problems. On problem number 3, they fundamentally misunderstand the core concept. But because they are just filling out a worksheet and nobody's actively monitoring their thought process in that exact moment, they keep going. They do problem 4, problem 10, problem 25, all the way to problem 50.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and they're using the exact same wrong method for every single one. By the time they finally reach problem 100, they haven't practiced multiplication 100 times. They have practiced the wrong method 97 times.
97 times. And the conclusion the source draws here is incredibly stark. By the end of that worksheet, that child is now significantly more confident in the wrong answer than they were back at problem 3. As the source says, that's not practice. That's damage.
They're creating damage instead of skill.
Yeah. Wait, let me see if I have the mechanics of this right. Because it's not just that the learner is failing to grasp the concept, right? It's that they are actively making it harder for themselves in the future.
Precisely. We have to look at why this matters on a physical, neurological level.
Yeah.
The brain doesn't inherently know the difference between practicing a good habit and practicing a bad one.
No, it just reacts to repetition. When you repeat an action, your brain simply wraps a fatty substance called myelin around the neural circuit that is firing. Myelin acts like insulation on a copper wire. It makes the signal travel faster and more efficiently.
Oh, wow.
So repetition of wrong practice actively hardwires bad habits into the physical structure of your brain. You are building superhighways for the wrong method.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because I always think about this in terms of trying to learn a physical skill, like a golf swing.
Oh, perfect analogy.
Yeah, like if you're all by yourself in your garage and you spend an hour repeating a terrible grip on the golf club, you aren't getting closer to being on the PGA Tour. You were just heavily myelinating a terrible swing.
Exactly. And the hidden cost there is the process of unlearning. Later on, a coach won't just have to teach you the right grip. They will have to spend double the time dismantling and overriding the deeply entrenched, highly myelinated, wrong neural pathways you built.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. Perfect practice, where mistakes are caught and corrected instantly, is the only thing that actually builds true mastery without that devastating cost of unlearning later.
Okay, but if unmonitored repetition is actually neurological damage, why on earth is it the foundational model of the entire traditional school system? I mean, if worksheets are a trap, why are they everywhere?
To understand that, the source strips away all the romanticism of education and looks purely at the logistical reality of a modern classroom.
Okay, let's look at the mechanics.
In a traditional setting, a teacher hands out an assignment with 50 problems. The teacher then walks around the room to offer help, but realistically, they can only monitor one child's thought process at a time.
Right.
That leaves 29 other children sitting at their desks, working completely unsupervised.
Meaning you have 29 kids potentially doing their 97 wrong repetitions.
Exactly the risk. And then look at the feedback loop. Those papers are collected at the end of the period. The teacher takes them home, grades them that night, and returns them to the students 2 days later, covered in red marks.
And the source notes a very specific, depressing detail about those red marks. The child looks at the grade on the paper, shoves it into their backpack, and never thinks about it again.
Yep.
The learning moment is entirely gone.
The learning moment is gone because the feedback loop has been completely severed. For feedback to be effective neurologically, it has to occur at the moment of action.
Okay.
Getting a red X 2 days after you perform the cognitive action, that doesn't help your brain rewire the circuit. Compare that to the one-on-one kitchen table model the source actually advocates for.
Right, the healthy version.
Exactly. In this model, the learner doesn't do 100 problems. They do 10 problems. But a mentor or parent is sitting right there watching the process. If a problem is done incorrectly, the error is caught immediately in real time. The friction is addressed right then, and the correct method is locked in before they move on. The ultimate takeaway here is a simple equation. 10 perfect reps are infinitely more valuable than 100 unmonitored reps.
10 perfect reps beat 100 unmonitored reps. I mean, it almost feels too simple, but the logic completely holds up.
It does.
But I also want to point out how carefully the source protects teachers in this section. It explicitly states that the 100-problem worksheet is not the teacher's fault. Honestly, what else can a single human being do with a 30-to-1 ratio and only 45 minutes on the clock?
Right, their hands are tied.
You have to keep order, so the worksheet isn't pedagogy, it's crowd control disguised as education.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is just an administrative tool functioning as a proxy for learning. A massive worksheet keeps 30 kids silent in their seats and occupied for 20 minutes so the teacher can, grade other papers or help a struggling student or literally just manage the chaos of the room.
And again, applying this to the adult world. How much of our own daily work is just adult crowd control?
Oh, so much of it.
We send endless chains of emails to look busy. We fill out rote weekly reports that nobody actually reads. We are just sitting at our adult desks doing the equivalent of 100 useless math problems because the structure makes us feel productive, even when zero actual forward progress is happening.
So if traditional worksheets are fundamentally just unmonitored damage and the traditional structures are just crowd control, the learner is left with a massive void.
Right.
If we throw away the worksheet, what actually replaces it? The source had to invent an entirely new vocabulary to break people out of their conditioning.
And the first piece of that new vocabulary has this deeply emotional origin story. The source shares a narrative about a mother named Lori and her daughter, Kaylee.
Yeah, this part was really touching.
It was. When Kaylee was first pulled out of public school, she was carrying intense negative emotional baggage. Lori noticed that every single time she told her daughter, hey, it's time to get schoolwork done, Kaylee would physically tense up.
Like a visceral reaction.
Exactly. The stress was palpable in her body. The phrase schoolwork had become a trigger for anxiety.
Because it carried the weight of delayed red X's, unmonitored frustration, and forced crowd control.
So the family sat down and intentionally threw the phrase away. They invented a new term, brain food.
Brain food. I love that.
They told Kaylee, we aren't doing schoolwork anymore, we are just fueling our brains. And almost immediately the physical resistance vanished because the framing changed from an arbitrary obligation to an act of personal nourishment.
But the source essentially defines brain food by what it isn't. It isn't passive reading. It isn't unmonitored repetition. If you are doing an activity just to cross it off a to-do list, it's not brain food.
Okay, so what is it then?
Brain food requires friction, high focus, and an immediate feedback loop. Sitting down and doing those 10 perfect math problems together while the mentor watches, that is brain food.
Right.
Reading a challenging chapter and actively debating the themes, brain food. It has clear intent and progression.
And the second term the source introduces operates in tandem with brain food to cover the rest of the day. It's called the invisible classroom.
The invisible classroom.
Yeah, this is defined as all the learning that happens organically, outside of formal instruction. And the source provides some incredibly vivid examples here.
Yeah, like the Airbnb example.
Yes. It describes a family remodeling an Airbnb rental property. The kids are on site, and they are measuring boards, fixing plumbing, and changing out vanities. They are learning spatial geometry and fractions in a high-stakes environment without a single worksheet in sight.
Let's look at why that specific example works so much better than the worksheet. When a kid measures a board incorrectly and cuts it, the piece of wood literally doesn't fit into the vanity.
Right. The math is wrong and the wood is ruined.
The feedback is physical, instant, and undeniable. It forces immediate problem solving. There is no delayed red X 2 days later. The real world provides the perfect practice feedback loop naturally.
Other examples from the text include a daughter tasked with setting up 60 tables for a large event, having to figure out the spatial geometry and spacing entirely on her own.
That's a lot of math.
Right. Or a son who watches a highly technical YouTube video about how combustion engines work and then spends dinner explaining the mechanics of it to his parents.
The environment itself becomes the teacher. So the source provides a golden equation for what it becomes real education. It dictates only 60 to 90 minutes of structured, highly focused brain food a day.
Wow.
And the rest of the day is handed over to the invisible classroom, allowing the learner to interact with the real world, pursue interests, and encounter natural friction.
Okay, I have to admit, I'm struggling with this 60 to 90 minutes rule.
Really? How come?
Well, as an adult who's used to an 8-hour workday or, a parent conditioned to a 7-hour school day, 90 minutes sounds incredibly sparse. So what does this all mean for the actual schedule? Is the source arguing that human brains literally max out after 90 minutes of focused cognitive load, or is it just being realistic about children's attention spans?
It is actually deeply grounded in cognitive science regarding deep work versus surface work.
Okay.
The human brain can only sustain highly focused, friction-heavy cognitive acquisition, true brain food, for short bursts before the myelinating process and directed attention begin to fatigue.
So you actually can't learn deeply for 8 hours straight.
Exactly. When you stretch a school day to 7 hours or a work day to 8 hours, you aren't getting 8 hours of deep learning. You are getting maybe an hour of actual cognitive progress padded with 6 hours of surface-level busy work and crowd control.
Huh?
By stripping away the busy work, you isolate the only part of the day that actually moves the needle.
That reframes everything. Whether you are a parent trying to structure a child's day or an adult trying to master a new skill in your limited free time, the challenge becomes evaluating your tasks. How do you know if a specific activity is actually brain food, or if you've just accidentally slipped back into disguised busy work?
Well, the source provides an ultimate litmus test for evaluating any educational task. Before you assign anything to a child or to yourself, you must ask one fundamental question.
What's the question?
Does this build curiosity or does it build resentment?
Oh, that's good. But I want to clarify a really important nuance the source offers here. Because building curiosity doesn't mean the learning process has to be fun and entertaining every single second.
Right. Not all.
Hard work isn't always fun. Struggling to grasp a completely foreign concept in those 90 minutes of brain food is going to be difficult and frustrating.
And this raises an important question regarding the emotional payoff of learning. There is a massive difference between two specific feelings. On one hand, you have the joy of mastery. This is the feeling you get when you struggle with a concept, fight through the friction, get immediate feedback, and finally realize, wow, I couldn't do this yesterday, and I can do it today.
That realization is deeply empowering. It creates a feedback loop where the learner actively seeks out the next challenge because they trust the process of improvement.
Exactly the opposite of the second feeling, which is the hollow, empty relief of finishing 100 pointless math problems that you already knew how to do before you picked up the pencil.
Oh, yeah, just checking the box.
Right. That empty relief breeds resentment. It creates a person who wants to shove the paper in a backpack, clock out of their job, and never engage with the material ever again.
Yeah.
The goal of education or any kind of adult skill acquisition shouldn't be to just assign more work.
Right. The goal is to assign better work because time is finite and curiosity is incredibly fragile.
Very fragile.
If you crush curiosity under the weight of unmonitored busy work, you lose the learner entirely. Well, we have covered some serious ground today. This deep dive systematically deconstructed the default models we all grew up trusting.
We really tore them apart.
We did. We started by identifying the kitchen table trap, recognizing our instinct to recreate the very systems that fail us just because they feel safe.
Yeah.
We busted the myth of unmonitored repetition, learning the hard neurological truth that 97 wrong reps are just creating damage that has to be unlearned later.
And that 10 perfect reps are the true path to mastery.
Exactly. And we discovered a healthier framework to replace the void left by the worksheet. By throwing out the triggering language and arbitrary structure of schoolwork, we can adopt the intentional high-friction focus of brain food.
And we can support that brief period of intense focus with the all-encompassing, real-world instant feedback of the invisible classroom.
You know, understanding this fundamental difference between busy work and real mastery is the ultimate key to protecting your own time. The mechanics of how our brains learn and how we waste time, they remain exactly the same no matter your age, whether you are 8 or 80.
For you, the listener, remember this. The human brain thrives on immediate feedback and real-world friction, and it withers under the weight of passive, unmonitored repetition.
Which leaves us with a final, lingering thought for you to chew on today. The source clearly shows how 100 unmonitored math problems are just crowd control disguised as education for kids.
Right.
But if we take that exact same logic and apply it to our adult lives, how much of your daily routine is just adult busy work? The endless emails, the meetings that could have been a paragraph, the reports that generate no action. Are you just engaging in adult crowd control to soothe your own anxiety about being productive?
It's a tough question to ask yourself.
It is. And more importantly, what would happen if you had the courage to cut all of that out, step away from the noise, and spend those same 90 minutes on pure, focused brain food instead? Stop doing the 100 problems. Find your 10 perfect reps.